As Yhwach finally began his long-awaited assault on the royal palace at the end of the Thousand Year Blood War Arc anime Part 2, he was met on the battlefield by the legendary Zero Division, all-powerful Shinigami charged with defending the Soul King himself. However, having come prepared to mercilessly trample any who would stand in his way, Yhwach summoned fittingly monstrous warriors from the depths of his own shadow. It was here that we were introduced to the most powerful villains in Bleach, an angelic group of elite Quincy called the Schutzstaffel. Fitting for a tyrannical god-king warlord such as Yhwach, his own personal royal guard are made up of the most devout, holiest of zealots in his army, ready to fight and die in the name of his conquest. I'd certainly been looking forward to seeing these guys in action for a while now. As far as the Sternritter are concerned, these four enemies are the longest running single set of Sternritter enemies, getting considerably more focus between them than the vast majority of villains in the Thousand Year Blood War arc. But who are the Schutzstaffel, Yhwach's elite guard that he had enough confidence in to summon against Squad Zero? What's the deal with this unique, near-divine Sternritter squad of Quincy's? And how do they compare to their fellow Sternritter, both in terms of ability and their impact in the story of Bleach, and what sort of role do they play overall? In today's video, we're going to shine the spotlight on the Schutzstaffel as a group within the cast of Bleach. As the most powerful Sternritter in the Vandenreich and the final enemies of Bleach itself, the Schutzstaffel have some of the craziest abilities in the series to date, and also get some of the biggest and best fights to help show them off. Though it's perhaps not saying much, I'd argue the Schutzstaffel are comprised of some of the best developed Sternritter characters, and their group dynamic is an interestingly unique one among the Empire. Since they've already been chosen to stand beside their king, the Schutzstaffel is lacking that savage dog-eat-dog mentality that the rest of the Sternritter have, which I find refreshing. That being said, they are undeniably terrifying nonetheless, with most of them becoming unkillable, even biblical, eldritch monstrosities in the end. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the most powerful enemies in Bleach, the very last hurdle for our heroes, at least until the Hell Arc materializes. Before we get started on the video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, when you're done with it, make sure to give it a thumbs up as well to help support me and the channel. And if you want to take that support for me another step further, I do also have a Patreon as well. And as always, I want to give a massive shout out and say a huge thank you to everyone supporting me there over on Patreon. I really do appreciate each and every one of you so very much. So, once again, thank you, I really do appreciate it. And of course, there will be full spoilers for the Thousand Year Blood War arc in this video to come, so you've been warned. Firstly, who are the Schutzstaffel? Who are the Sternritter that make up this group, and what's their relationship like? The Schutzstaffel, which hasn't actually been named as such yet in the anime, their name is first revealed by Reio when they arrive to assist him during the battle in the Soul King's throne room, is initially made up of only 3 Sternritter who are permitted to stand alongside Yhwach on his grand stage. The leader of the Schutzstaffel is Sternritter X, the X-axis Lille Barro, who was also the first Quincy to ever be given a shrift by Yhwach. Because of this, Lille considers himself Yhwach's greatest creation, and believes himself to be the man closest to God. The other 2 members are Sternritter C, the compulsory Pernida Parnkgjas, and Sternritter M, the miracle Gerard Valkyrie, both mysterious Quincy, whose origins are the source of much speculation among the rest of the lower-ranked Sternritter. It's revealed that Yhwach never actually gave these 2 a shrift, making them the only Sternritter in the army to not have one. Instead, he simply bestowed them a holy letter based on the powers they already possessed due to their secret affiliation with the Soul King himself. And throughout the second invasion, the lower-ranked Sternritter are all vying for Yhwach's favour, presumably in the hope of being promoted, with many of them hoping to do so by killing Ichigo, the #1 special war power. However, none of them are chosen for promotion in the end. Instead, Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Nakk is promoted to the Schutzstaffel at the start of the Royal Palace assault, sparing him from annihilation at the hands of Yhwach's Auswählen, despite him not really getting involved in the second invasion at all. As the only Quincy brought up from below, Askin doesn't share that sense of immediate camaraderie with the rest of the Schutzstaffel and presumably would have to earn it, as shown by Gerard threatening to cut him down if he proves to be useless in the upcoming battle. Later, Sternritter A, the antithesis Uryu Ishida, is also promoted to the Schutzstaffel, though seemingly unofficially, at least to begin with. After witnessing him dispatch Ichigo from the palace, Gerard welcomes Uryu with open arms, but both Hashwolf and Lille seem to be suspicious of his intentions. Although Hashwolf doesn't consider Uryu a member of the Schutzstaffel, it's later revealed that Yhwach does, as a Quincy soldier reports to Hashwolf that Uryu was among them at Yhwach's behest. However, it's believed that these are not the first Schutzstaffel to stand by Yhwach's side. 1,000 years ago, we see that Yhwach, currently ruling over the Lichtreich Empire, has a different quartet of Quincy as his personal guard. Hubert, Argola, Zedritz, and a currently unnamed woman wielding a machine gun. Presumably none of these characters have shrifts and are here purely based on their own innate Quincy power and skill. The relationship between the members of the Schutzstaffel is starkly different to that shared by most other Sternritter. The initial three of them seem to have a mutual respect for each other and share a history together apparently as well, as Lille muses that every opponent they've ever faced has been easy for them to defeat, though I do wonder when in the timeline he could have actually fought an enemy as part of this group of the Schutzstaffel, considering this Schutzstaffel didn't seem to be present for the war 1,000 years ago. Interestingly, the one scene that always felt out of character for the Schutzstaffel as time went by and we built on their dynamic as a group, that being Gerard angrily berating Lille for killing Senjumaru in Yhwach's path, is cut from the anime, and I wonder if it's because it doesn't represent their relationship well anymore, nor does it respect the hierarchy of the Schutzstaffel itself, with Lille seemingly kowtowing to Gerard despite being the leader. Meanwhile, Gerard playfully ribbing Lille over his inability to shoot through Hikifune's cage of life is an interesting exchange. Gerard doesn't seem to be genuinely insulting Lille, it's a much more friendly dynamic than that, and more than anything, Gerard is genuinely surprised Lille's bullets haven't worked here. The same is true again later on. When Oetsu cuts down Gerard in a single stroke, Lille can't fathom Oetsu being able to kill Gerard with such a trick. The anime even added a new scene where Gerard was amazed that Oetsu was on his feet again after being blasted by Lille. And later, Gerard makes a point of catching Pernida after it falls from the side of the ruined palace and brings it back up to the platform with him. Really, it's only Askin who gets some of Gerard's ire, but I wonder if his performance against Squad Zero was enough to quickly win the respect of his peers. I know we were really pressed for time at this part in the story, but I would have loved a little bit of introspection into Askin's thought process behind being the only Sternritter to be spared from Auswählen. He must have known what was going to happen to the rest of them down below. Did he care at all, or was he just grateful to be alive? The Schutzstaffel as a group are the personal royal guard of Yhwach, a dark reflection of the Zero Division itself. Although Yugrim Hashwolf spends a lot of time with the Schutzstaffel as the Grand Master of the Sternritter, he outranks them all on a separate tier of the hierarchy, one just beneath Yhwach. Interestingly, I would have thought that Uryu's position as heir would have theoretically put him on a higher pedestal too, though he's mostly just treated the same as the rest of the Schutzstaffel here. Lille Barro's position as leader of the Schutzstaffel is uncontested. Unflinchingly devoted to his king, Lille sees himself as an emissary of God, one of his purest angels, whose job is to destroy those he deems sinners in the eyes of the Quincy nation and dispense God's justice. Thanks to his shrift, the X-axis, Lille uses his massive sniper rifle diagram, which he considers his bow, to destroy his enemies with an all-penetrating shot. When using his shrift, diagram doesn't fire any bullets. Instead, it simply obliterates everything between the muzzle of the gun and Lille's designated target, with no exceptions. Like the rest of his Schutzstaffel counterparts, Lille is terrifyingly powerful, capable of taking on the Zero Division's own Oetsu Nimaya, as well as battling the Captain Commander Kyoraku Shunsui on fairly even ground. Thanks to his power of the X-axis, Lille is able to become intangible after facing death several times, and even survives Kyoraku's Bankai thanks to the immortal nature of his Volsten dish, which sees his obliterated head restored and transformed in a godly light. Speaking of which, in his holy form, Lille becomes a literal being of pure light, dedicated to seeking out sinners and purifying them in death. Lille's monstrous, almost conceptually weird holy form is Kubo's attempt at bringing to life a horrifying, biblically accurate seraphim which appears strange and otherworldly to normal beings. Despite his position as leader of the Schutzstaffel and his immense power, however, Lille is the second member of the Schutzstaffel to be defeated in the final battle. Lille's first appearance in Bleach is in chapter 599 alongside Gerard and Pernida, though his first appearance in the anime is much earlier, appearing in episode 14 or chapter 543 in terms of the source material. Lille gets one of the longest fights in the series. His battle against Kyoraku and Nanao, which I've covered in depth for one of my Bleach battle analysis videos, is an incredible spectacle, even if the ending is a little dubious. As a result of this, despite not receiving any real backstory, Lille is one of the Sternritter with the most exposure across the arc, and his power set is fully realised, including his Volsten dish, which is called Ziliel, or the Judgment of God, which seems very fitting for one designated as God's chosen executioner. Lille's holy form is totally unique, and is one of the rare Volsten dish to elicit a complete transformation. When transformed, Lille's Ziliel garbs him in a long, strange-looking robe which tapers off into 2 points at the bottom. In this form, Lille's arms are gone, either removed entirely or encased within the robe, which seems to have completely engulfed him, only the top half of Lille's face still visible as it pokes over the rim of his now enormous collar. A huge halo encircles the top of his form, and 8 massive feathered wings sprout from his back, each one lined with 3 circular holes. In this form, Lille is totally immune to physical attacks of any kind, be they with a Zanpakuto or even Kido. He's capable of genuine teleportation now as well, and can alter his form further, unravelling the bottom of the robe to reveal 2 alien, almost horse-like legs. It was at this point where things really started to click as far as working out what Kubo was doing with Lille, although of course on first glance it looked extremely strange and very weirdly abstract. Of course it was at this point where it was like, okay, Kubo's trying to do something very otherworldly here, something that we can't really comprehend, and in that sense I think he did actually succeed. After having his head destroyed by Kyoraku's Bankai, Lille's holy form changes again, restoring his head in a pillar of light, except now it sits on the end of a long, dragon-like neck, and his head resembles that of a cherubim, round-cheeked, fair-skinned, and with curly, wavy hair, yet his facial features are now those of an owl's. This makes sense thematically again, and I actually think this is one of Kubo's coolest designs, even though he does stretch it to the point where my suspension of disbelief struggles a little bit. But I love the fact that the cherubim attend directly to God, and that's of course Lille's position here as the leader of the Schutzstaffel. This form of Lille's has received some criticism from readers who believe the character no longer resembles the Sternritter at all at this point, both in appearance and personality. And while I do get that to some degree, I think this form is actually really cool, like I said, and it's genuinely imposing. I think this form is really supposed to be Lille's innate, zealous nature really brought to the forefront, as that zealotry does seem to be the main defining aspect of his personality. Of all of the Sternritter, he seems to be the one most devoted to Yhwach. For me, that struggle with the suspension of disbelief comes in mostly when Kubo does really strange and weird things with Lille's actual design with his body, making his head twist and warp and grow and expand, and it all just looks really strange. But the actual design itself I am quite a big fan of. Interestingly, the anime has depicted a new, half-formed version of his holy form, producing just 2 of its wings and a much smaller, more generic-looking halo upon Lille's resurrection via the Auswählen. The colour of Lille's Vollständig is apparently emerald green, and as I've said in the past, I'm intrigued to see how that will look when he's a being made entirely of that light. The other Sternritter that make up the Schutzstaffel are as follows. Sternritter C the Compulsory, Pernida Parnkgjas, initially a weird, small, hooded Quincy whose true identity is unknown. And Pernida was always a really cool late-stage mystery. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out what this thing actually was. I mean, whatever this Quincy was, it didn't seem to be human, based on its bulbous glowing eyes just barely visible beneath the rim of its hood, its odd, almost pentagonal head shape, and its unintelligible whispering. Though apparently Lille could understand and translate it. Kubo drops a few hints along the way as to what Pernida's true identity is, with some of them being more overt than others, and it's finally revealed in its battle against Mayuri. Pernida is in fact the left arm of the Soul King, given sentience. Thanks to the anime as well, we now know how the left arm came into Yhwach's possession and why it serves him. Pernida's Schrift, the Compulsory, is, much like Lille's before it, incredibly dangerous, and so far I have to say as well, that as far as Schrifts go, both the X-Axis and the Compulsory are 2 of my favourites, and are some of the most fleshed out and best developed abilities within the Sternritter. The most outwardly offensive capability of the Compulsory is its power to control and warp things, both organic and inanimate, with its own nerves. As Pernida sends its nerves out, often imperceptibly, they force their way into the target's body. From there, Pernida can then control the target as it sees fit, often using its nerves to twist and destroy the victim's body in gruesome ways. Yoruichi has her arm instantly twisted, snapped and broken, her bones curving before her eyes in a really awesome body horror image, something that Kubo is low-key kind of really good at, by the way, something we see a lot of here in the 1000-Year Blood War arc. And then next, Kenpachi's arm, after being controlled, tries to kill him with his own Zanpakuto, forcing the Shinigami to rip his renegade limb off, but not before it grips the blade so tightly that he has to tear his own fingers apart as well to actually free his Zanpakuto. Pernida's nerves are able to affect and destroy virtually anything or anyone. The gigantic second-level divine soldier summoned by Senjumaru to defend the palace is turned into a contorted bloody pulp almost immediately, while during its battle with Mayuri, Pernida uses its nerves to basically take control of the entire floor of the battlefield. But the other, I would say, slightly more subtle aspect of the Compulsory is Pernida's ability to continuously evolve. By coming into contact with things using its nerves, Pernida is able to evolve on a near constant basis based on the data it receives, rapidly learning speech, quickening its own reflexes, and even learning to shed its skin based on the ability of Mayuri's new Bankai. But that's not all, and it's here we get probably my favourite aspect of the Compulsory, the one that I think makes it feel the most overbearing. Any single part of Pernida that is separated from the main hand can grow almost instantly into a brand new arm, complete with its own Quincy abilities. And as we see as the fight progresses, Pernida is capable of destroying itself in order to grow more versions of itself, though I'll never really understand how it managed to rip its own middle finger off with just its one hand. But all of this results in the Compulsory being one of the most all-encompassing and overwhelming abilities in Bleach, fitting for an appendage of God. Of course, as mentioned earlier, this power wasn't bestowed upon Pernida by Yhwach. It already had the power to constantly evolve, thanks to the left arm of the Soul King representing progress, while the right arm counterpart represents stillness. Pernida's holy form is never revealed in the source material, but in the anime we have seen at least a partial version of it, where Pernida has brilliant gold wings that take the shape of giant hands, rather fittingly. Meanwhile, Pernida is seen using a couple of different bows. In fact, it can summon a bow atop each of its fingertips to rapidly blast arrows at its opponent, or it can conjure one larger bow which has the strength to obliterate Mayuri's Ashisoge Jizo spawn from the inside, which again it's able to fire with its single hand. Like Lille, Pernida has one of the longest, most intricate battles in Bleach, and is often considered Mayuri's best fight. However, of the Schutzstaffel, Pernida is the first to be defeated overall. Sternritter M, the Miracle Gerard Valkyrie, is an enormous, boisterous man cloaked in a red cape, the top half of his face obscured by a winged helmet. On one arm he bears a circular shield, while in the other he wields his holy sword Hoffnung. In the source material, Gerard was probably my least favourite member of the Schutzstaffel, though that's mostly due to how little we knew about him, and how strange of a character he really is. What I'm saying is, a few answers would go a long way with this guy. Gerard's Schrift, the Miracle, is one we've talked about quite a bit in the past, and it gives him the power to overcome impossible challenges, allowing him to materialise the hopes of the masses who depend on him. This is a vague and abstract Schrift, and its power takes many forms. Since Gerard's sword represents the hopes of the masses, breaking the sword in any way will reflect that fear as an injury back upon Gerard's opponent. The same goes for his body. Since the masses depend on him to win, and they expect him to win as with such a titanic form, any injury inflicted upon Gerard's physical body will transform him with his god size, making him literally bigger and stronger. This itself is seemingly limitless. Gerard can be killed, whether that's having his head obliterated or split in two, but he will simply resurrect in an angelic light, his entire body now bigger and stronger than before, because that's what was destroyed. There's even more to it than that though as well. Gerard's power and its effectiveness depends on the probability of his success. For example, when tasked with trying to find the scurrying, hiding Vizards, Gerard realised it was basically impossible to root them out, and so was able to locate them immediately. The same goes for when he faced off against the Gote 13 initially. His body became gargantuan upon his defeat because the chance of him defeating so many captain-level opponents on his own was initially next to none. It would be reductive to say the Miracle allows Gerard to make the impossible possible, but in a sense that is what his Schrift does. I don't like this Schrift quite as much as I like the X-axis and the compulsory, but it's not bad, especially when you get into the nitty-gritty of it a bit more and you really start to see and understand how it works. It becomes a little more likeable, I think, overall, and I think it is crucially very fitting for a character of this kind, very much the last wall the Shinigami have to break down. And I will say I've always enjoyed the visuals of Gerard resurrecting himself, particularly when he transforms into his Vollständisch. It looks absolutely amazing and is exactly the kind of thing you'd expect to see from, again, a character of this nature, this colossal, titanic, looming giant who has just transformed, these enormous angelic wings on his back, this huge Nordic helmet on his face. As far as imagery goes, all that sort of thing I really liked. Now, as with Pernida, this power wasn't bestowed upon Gerard by Yhwach. It comes as a result of him being the vessel that holds the heart of the Soul King, though we know nothing more than that. During his battle with Kenpachi, Byakuya and Toshiro, a Quincy cross is revealed in the centre of his being. And I always speculated that this was some kind of a core, a vital weakness that was never exploited, and Kubo confirmed that to be true via Club Outside. While we know very little about Gerard, I would probably argue he is the Schutzstaffel member we know the least about. He seems to be some kind of inhuman golem, a creature brought to life by the magic of the Soul King to steadfastly fight for his king, even in death, as he himself says. Gerard's ultimate battle isn't quite as long or complete as Lille's or Pernida's, but it's still an impressive showing where Gerard gets to reveal most of what he can do. His Vollständisch, Ashtonig, or the authority of God, only slightly transforms Gerard. In his holy form, as I mentioned earlier, he gains enormous, feathery, crimson wings that take on the appearance of an angel more so than any other Sternritter. He also gains a brand new Nordic helmet that extends to his jaw and massive intricate markings running down his back and arms. Of course, the name is very apt once again. Gerard represents the unwavering power of Yhwach and the authority that he holds over all such things. And as Yhwach's most statuesque defender, his sword and shield, Gerard represents that perhaps better than anyone else. Much like Lille, Gerard undergoes another transformation after being killed. This time, as his entire body is reduced to rubble by the captains, he becomes a creature of pure light entirely, his helmet now brandishing a fiery plumage. When you look at the fact that initially, as he first entered his god-sized form, he was roughly the height of some of the taller buildings, but some of the buildings still towered over him. At this point, Gerard is by far and away the most colossal character we have ever seen in Bleach, towering over the entire cityscape around him and completely dwarfing previously massive beings like Yami, Hulir, or Po in his resurrection. Of all the Schutzstaffel members, Gerard is defeated last, and only because Yhwach decides in that moment that he's outlived his purpose, though I'm hoping to see this changed in the anime. And finally, we have my personal favourite member of the Schutzstaffel, Sternritter D, the death-dealing Askin Nakk, who is also my favourite Sternritter and one of my favourite characters in Bleach altogether. On the surface, Askin brings a level of self-deprecating, goofy levity to the Schutzstaffel. Despite his promotion, he doesn't seem to really fit in here with the big leagues and is well aware of that. Whereas characters like Lille and Gerard like to boast about their strength because as far as they're concerned, they should be godly in comparison to the Shinigami and go on vengeful, almost insane rants about how much stronger they are than the Shinigami when their hubris gets the better of them. Askin believes that doing so only exposes your insecurities, and as such is a much more level-headed, humble, and down-to-earth enemy. However, Askin is darkly competent, clever, powerful, and above all else, savvy. He has a lot more self-awareness than the other members of the Schutzstaffel, and there really isn't another character like him. He's oddly meta and seems aware of the fact that he's a character in a story, often using that to actively go against the established tropes of Bleach to his advantage. Askin is one of the many characters that undeniably resembles Aizen in some form or another, but he has a thinner, more expressive face, coupled with an odd outfit that doesn't seem to really gel with the rest of the Vandenreich at all, including several brightly coloured bracelets and a hefty, ridged collar piece, which seems to be made of sturdy stuff as it survives Yushiro's Shunko attack, where his top is completely incinerated. Of all the Schutzstaffel members, Askin is given by far the most exposure, being a prominent villain in the arc long before his promotion to the upper echelon, first seen in chapter 543, acting as a mediator to both Hashwolf and Basby, though in actuality his first appearance is all the way back in chapter 494. As a result of this, Askin has interactions with numerous characters before joining up with the Schutzstaffel, including Mayuri Kurotsuchi. In the source material, Askin was the only member of the Schutzstaffel to truly get two distinct fights. One very short one against Oetsu Nimaya, but a battle nonetheless, and then his full fight later on against Kisuke and Yoroichi. However, the anime has expanded the role of the Squad Zero, thereby giving all of the Schutzstaffel additional battles too. Askin Schrift the death-dealing, while not quite turning him into an immortal divine being like the other three members of the Schutzstaffel, is extremely dangerous in its own right, and one of my favourite Schrifts of them all. The death-dealing allows Askin to control the lethal dose of substances like blood or reishi and use that to effectively poison his enemies, while acquiring immunity himself. Again, like Gerard's The Miracle, it seems like there's a lot going on here, but in reality it can be boiled down fairly simply. The way Askin uses the death-dealing against Oetsu is definitely the most convoluted and certainly the least interesting visually, and isn't really explored again after this fight. Having been slashed by Oetsu's blade, Askin drinks his own blood in a very vampiric way, which admittedly does look really cool, giving him the power to target and poison the Shinigami's blood and turn it against him. Later, I think Askin's powers are simplified somewhat, or at the very least they are streamlined, I think. Basically, he can become immune to anything that's used to hurt him so long as it doesn't kill him in one hit. For example, Yushiro seriously wounds Askin with Bakuen Muso, his Shunko attack, but it doesn't kill him. Therefore, Askin becomes completely immune to Yushiro's Reiatsu and totally negates his next attack, while also healing his own wounds as he becomes fully resistant to that power. Honestly, I really love this ability because in my opinion it is fittingly strong, to the point where it is basically broken, and Askin is one of the final enemies of the series, so I think that's fair enough. But unlike other Shrifts like, say, the X-Axis or the Miracle, I think the death dealing gives away a very obvious way to defeat Askin. As long as you can one-shot him with something that would be fatal, which again is a really cool link, then you'll be able to finish him off, which is exactly what happens. Speaking of which, as an aside, I always thought Soifon would have been the perfect opponent to showcase Askin's power, and to this day, I wish she'd come to Yoruichi's aid instead of Yushiro, to the point where it really surprises me that she didn't, especially since Soifon just goes completely missing during the Wahrwelt Battle, to the point where you have to assume that she was somehow sniped by Lille. But Soifon could have blitzed Askin and stabbed him with Suzumebachi before stabbing him a second time to instantly kill him with Nigeki Kesatsu, only to find it doesn't work, as he's gained immunity to her power in the interval where she was trying to stab him a second time. I could even imagine him saying something like, "2 steps kill her, that's a scary name, if only it was 1 step kill, you might have actually won." But Askin also utilises the death dealing in a more traditional sense too, using abilities like Gift Ball, Gift Bad, and Gift Ball Deluxe to poison and wear down his enemies, though he doesn't believe in killing them in that state. As a result of being very difficult to kill himself, Askin claims to always feel as though he's far from death's door. Of the Schutzstaffel, he is the 3rd to be defeated, and his fight, while great, is shorter and more broken up than those of Lille and Pernida before him. Askin's holy form, Hashane, or God's Poison Taster, is slick and cool looking. It's perhaps most similar to Kirige OP's Piskiel in terms of how much he actually changes. Askin himself remains mostly the same, but he gains a few accessories. His wings take on a segmented molecular design and become bright purple. Meanwhile, he begins wearing a really awesome purple visor over his eyes, and his halo also has a molecular aesthetic as well. Finally, his trousers and boots become embroiled in a fiery purple Reiatsu. I always liked that Kubo was able to present Askin as very strong, yet still on a different lower level to the other Schutzstaffel. While it was basically impossible to put characters like Lille or Gerard down for good, once Askin's heart was removed, that was it for him. And in my opinion, that helped kind of level the playing field a little bit, where a lot of people were kind of annoyed at how impossible to kill Lille and Gerard were. To me, the fact that Askin went down relatively easy by comparison, that just made their power levels make sense all the more as far as I was concerned. Because obviously they would be on a totally different level to him. Interestingly, Askin is given an actual motivation for following Yhwach outside of blind loyalty or fear, which tends to define most of the other Sternritter. As perhaps the lone being capable of destroying all 3 worlds and creating something new from the ashes, Yhwach interests him. While Askin openly admits to being a follower rather than a pioneer, which again is a character trait I really like, he muses that he wants to see what new world Yhwach will create, leading to Kisuke telling him that a real scientist breaks boundaries with their own 2 hands rather than watching from the sidelines. This is one of my favourite interactions in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, especially since, rather than lose his cool and go on some crazy rant, as you would expect nearly any other Sternritter to do after having his ideals questioned like that and basically shut down, Askin says that he likes Kisuke's answer, but he personally would still rather see what Yhwach makes instead. It showcases an incompatible difference in ideals without one side devolving and shouting maniacally. Also, for a long time, I thought Askin might survive the war, but it was this interaction that sealed his fate for me, as I realised that as aloof as he was, as seemingly uncaring about this whole conflict as he was, his motivations are deeply cruel, evil even, willing to see billions of beings destroyed out of mere curiosity. Curiosity that he wasn't even willing to get his hands dirty over himself. And that is part of what makes Askin such a great character as far as I'm concerned. He is in a sense using Yhwach to further his own interests, to the point where he even sardonically says to Kisuke, you know, does that sound like I'm looking down on His Majesty? Well, you know that's not the case. I love all of that sort of thing, and it really breaks the mould as far as this army of zealots go. Askin does feel very unique in that regard. Interestingly, according to Kubo himself, each member of the Schutzstaffel represents an era of warfare, which is a very cool and unique way to individually theme them, and of course is absolutely fitting when you consider their destructive power. Pernida represents ancient warfare, likely due to it being a near mythical being itself, something of legend, a lost appendage of an ancient god. Plus, Pernida doesn't use any weapons per se, it uses only its own powers, its bare hands, pun intended, to fight. Gerard represents the medieval warfare of the Middle Ages. Medieval warfare, certainly in areas of Europe at least, saw the rise of the armoured knight and cavalry, and Gerard symbolises this with his overall attire and his use of a sword and shield as his primary tools of battle. Lille represents the era of modern warfare, which is believed to have been started with the gunpowder revolution that completely transformed how war was conducted, and featured a newfound emphasis on artillery, which of course fits Lille's character as a marksman. Finally, we have Askin, who represents the current era, presumably meaning the newest, most technologically advanced forms of warfare, though I have a difficult time distinguishing the difference between modern and current. But based on his powers, Askin definitely seems to embody chemical or biological warfare most of all. Alright, so let's take a look at the role the Schutzstaffel play throughout the story of Bleach. In my video on the Bambis, I mentioned that they were endgame villains due to the majority of them not appearing until chapter 544. Well, that goes doubly true here for the Schutzstaffel, who don't appear as a fighting force until chapter 599, less than 100 chapters before the end of the story, and so these guys are very much the final bosses. Askin is introduced much earlier than the others, as I said, first appearing briefly in chapter 494, however he isn't technically a member of the Schutzstaffel until chapter 599, when they all appear, so we'll start there. As mentioned before though, the anime introduces Lille, Gerard and Pernida slightly earlier. They're standing on the stage alongside Yhwach when he announces that Uryu is to be his successor. Come chapter 599, the Schutzstaffel are summoned to Yhwach's side as he truly begins his assault on the royal palace following the brutal death of Nyanzol Yzol at the hands of Senjumaru. Emerging from Yhwach's inky shadow, Askin notes he was the only Sternritter promoted from below. Gerard then rushes Senjumaru, destroying her sealed Zanpakuto with a hefty swing of his blade before she calls down the second-level divine soldier who towers behind her. Pernida whispers something which Lille then translates before the divine soldier is immediately warped and killed by Pernida's mysterious power. Before Senjumaru can even act, Lille unveils his rifle and shoots her through the head, seemingly killing her instantly. As the Schutzstaffel prepare to approach the palace, however, the ruse of the Zero Division is revealed. The Quincy's have been lured into a trap as Hikifune's cage of life completely encompasses them, surrounding them on all sides and imprisoning them on the false royal walkway. As Lille tries to shoot them free to no avail, Oetsu Nimaya arrives and, using his unstable blade Sayafushi, cuts down each member of the Schutzstaffel with ease. Gerard lunges for him, only to miss with his swing and be instantly slain, blood spurting into the sky. Lille attempts to shoot Oetsu, but his bullets are deflected before he's cleanly sliced in two by the Shinigami. Pernida prepares an attack, but Uetsu buries his sword into the creature's hood, killing it immediately before turning to attack Askin, but the Sternritter narrowly dodges out of the way of the killing strike. Before Askin can move again, however, Uetsu simply cuts his throat in one fell swoop. While Tenjiro and Senjumaru battle Hashwolf and Uryu respectively, Askin gets back on his feet, shocking Uetsu. The two fight briefly, with Askin using his shrift to trap Uetsu, but thanks to Tenjiro's last-minute intervention, Uetsu is able to defeat Askin once and for all, the Sternritter dropping to the ground in a spray of crimson. However, Yhwach activates the Owl's Valence, stealing the power and life force of the Sternritter, remaining down in the Seirete to resurrect his fallen Schutzstaffel, helping them to rise once again under a crystalline blue rain. Now, with their holy forms partially active, the Schutzstaffel continue the fight, with Lille blasting Uetsu several times with the true power of the X-axis. As you know, of course, the anime greatly expands their fight, with Uetsu being spirited away thanks to Tenjiro and Senjumaru before being revived, and the battle continues anew. Gerard fights Senjumaru and is pinned to the ground by her Shikai Shigarami, but manages to free himself and knock her down with a swift, brutal punch to the face. Pernida finds itself trapped inside Hikifune's root prison, but uses the compulsory to burst free and defeat the Shinigami. Askin is overwhelmed by Tenjiro's continued assault and blood rain, but manages to poison him before shooting Tenjiro through the back with an arrow. And finally, Uetsu tries to force Lille into a corner by putting Yhwach's life on the line, but Lille takes him down with a swift shot to the stomach as Uetsu misunderstands how the X-axis actually works. With the Schutzstaffel now appearing to be victorious, Senjumaru activates her BANKAI at the cost of the other Squad Zero members' lives, and uses its incredible power to seal away every member of the Schutzstaffel within individual tapestries. This is a pretty huge addition to the Schutzstaffel's overall story, and at the time of this video, we don't yet know how they escape. We just know they will. Much later, in the throne room of the Soul King's palace, Pernida is summoned by Yhwach to attack Yoruichi, destroying her arm with the compulsory before the other three members of the Schutzstaffel arrive, surrounding Chad, Orihime, and Ganju, which is when we learn of their unit's name. As Ichigo falls from the palace, Lille moves to snipe him, but Uryu fires an arrow first, gaining Gerard's trust and a place among the Schutzstaffel himself. Yhwach then moves to destroy Mimihagi and drain the Soul King of his overflowing power. However, as Yhwach stumbles, unable to absorb the entirety of Reio's Reiatsu, Lille offers him a hand, but is shocked to see an army of strange eyeball monsters emerge from the ends of his king's cloak, the creatures suddenly swarming the Schutzstaffel. Hashwolf is quick to tell them, however, that they won't be harmed. The Soul King's only enemy is the Shinigami, after all. Later still, we see the Schutzstaffel lounging in the palace, kicking back on sofas while Askin tucks into some grapes. I've always liked the small details in this shot, the casual disdain they have for this holiest of ground, as they've clearly knocked over furniture and not bothered to move it. As Lille wonders what their next move is, Askin tells him they can't get near Yhwach yet for fear of being consumed. It's kind of funny thinking about where this little lounging area is situated in terms of the palace itself. It's like a little reception area if you're going to have an appointment with the Soul King himself. However, eventually Hashwolf tells them that the Soul King is gone and the process is complete. Together, the Schutzstaffel enters the throne room once more and finds Yhwach now surrounded by a strange, oily black substance, making Askin uneasy. And when they witness Yhwach's eldritch, horrific new form, the Schutzstaffel is terrified, with Askin stumbling backwards out of fear. Yhwach then demonstrates his new untold power by obliterating the roof of the palace, sending the Schutzstaffel scrabbling for their lives as they struggle to gain a foothold on the debris. After Yhwach has forged their new palace for them out of the ruined remains of the Vandenreich city from down in the Seirete, the Schutzstaffel all bow to him as he proclaims to them the title of their new world, Wahrwelt. As the last remnants of the Gotei 13 and its allies step foot upon Wahrwelt, Hashwolf declares that they will kill all of the intruders, the Schutzstaffel then splitting off into different directions to engage the enemy all across the final battlefield. We first see Askin, who is unhappy about running into Ichigo's gang, though he decides it's probably better than the main Gotei 13 unit, as Grimmjow suddenly jumps him, decimating the tower he's standing on. Askin manages to escape, fleeing from the gang before tricking Grimmjow into attacking a gift ball, instantly poisoning the Espada. Meanwhile, Lille spies on the advancing soldiers of the Gotei 13, casually picking off the stragglers with his rifle from afar. From his vantage point, he takes out the struggling Hisagi, incapacitating the vice-captain with a single shot, as on the other side of Wahrwelt, Gerard finds himself at an empty dead end, unable to locate the enemy at all. This leaves Pernida, who is directly confronted by the unlikely duo of Mayuri and Zaraki. Zaraki attempts to rush Pernida, but the Sternritter ensnares his arm in its nerves, crippling it. The arm then tries to attack Zaraki, but he tears it off before attacking Pernida again, only to have his legs destroyed immediately this time instead. Before Zaraki's entire body can be crushed into nothingness, Mayuri steps in and rescues him, paralysing him completely with his Shikai, preventing Pernida from being able to move him at all. Mayuri, alongside Nemu, then battles Pernida, who is revealed to be the left arm of the Soul King, in a desperate, lengthy duel that results in Pernida being obliterated by Nemu's true strength after Mayuri's newly altered Bankai fails to do the job. As chunks of Pernida's body rain down from the sky, the Sternritter is revealed to have survived, however, and tears Nemu to pieces, killing her instantly. Mayuri then finishes Pernida off as it tries to devour Nemu's remains, trapping it in an everlasting cycle of growth, evolution, and then destruction. Meanwhile, as Lille continues to pick off members of the Gotei 13, Kyoraku decides to bait out his hiding spot. Lille seemingly snipes Kyoraku successfully in the chest, only for the Captain Commander to instantly locate him and challenge him to battle and to a game, slicing off the end of his gun barrel in one swift stroke. Lille's holy form drives Kyoraku to use his long-awaited Bankai, but even cutting Lille's throat and bursting his head isn't enough to kill him, as the Executioner of God rises again, transforming into a monstrous animalistic angel of light. With Nanao's help, however, and the divine power of her family's ancestral blade, the Shinken Hakyoken, the two of them are able to strike Lille down at last, separating his body into pieces with his own reflected power, sending him falling from the heavens down into Seirete far below. Down in the Seirete, Lille, now a fallen angel having been reduced to a mere fledgling shadow of his former self, rages incoherently, decimating the Seirete before being confronted by a reanimated Izuru Kira, who cuts down the leader of the Schutzstaffel for good. At the same time, Askin, having defeated Grimmjow, also bests Ichigo, Chad, and Orihime with ease, thanks to his poisonous powers. Confronted by Yoruichi, who buys Ichigo and the others enough time to continue onwards, Askin fights both her and her younger brother Yushiro. Although Askin is seemingly outmatched by the Shihoin siblings, in reality he baits Yushiro into attacking him, enabling him to become immune to the child's powers before seriously wounding him and then poisoning Yoruichi as well. However, Kisuke Urahara arrives to help, momentarily freeing Yoruichi from Askin's toxic grip, enabling her to continue fighting. Kisuke forces Yoruichi to transform using her ability Shunko Raijin Senkei Kokubyo Senbi, which turns her into a lightning cat, but Askin eventually overcomes her using his holy form, surrounding them all in his enormous Gift Ball Deluxe prison. To counter Askin's power, Kisuke activates his Bankai and keeps Askin distracted long enough for him to be impaled through the chest from behind by Grimmjow, who Kisuke revived earlier. With his heart removed, Askin Askin collapses and dies, but not before unconsciously releasing the lock on his shrift, brutally poisoning both Kisuke and Grimjo, leaving them all to crumple to the ground in pools of blood as the Gift Ball Deluxe goes haywire. All the while, throughout the second half of the Wahrwelt Battle, Gerard has been busy taking on the Gotei 13 after intercepting the remainder of their fighters, who made it to the central fortress of Wahrwelt itself after Kyoraku left to confront Lille. Although it seems like he's no match for them, initially Gerard's The Miracle activates, allowing him to completely overpower the entire group at once. Now towering over the fighters, Gerard proceeds to seek out those who escaped him, including the Vizards. Forcing them out of hiding, Gerard faces the Vizards in battle, the four of them attacking him at once, but he knocks them out with a single swipe of his arm, destroying them with his immense power. As Gerard prepares to annihilate the entire surrounding area to finish everyone off in one go, Hitsugaya arrives, challenging him to battle. Teaming up with Byakuya and a revived Zaraki, the three captains struggle against Gerard's overbearing godly might, the Sternritter continuously beating them down no matter what they throw at him. Working together, the captains are able to kill Gerard on several occasions, but his shrift simply resurrects him each time, bigger and stronger than before. After Zaraki uses BANKAI and Hitsugaya unveils his true completed strength, the captains find themselves at their wits' end, only for a column of holy light to erupt forth from the skies above, bringing judgment down upon Gerard as Yhwach's final Owl's Valen strips him to the bone, killing him instantly. All four members of the Schutzstaffel are given lengthy, in-depth battles, with Pernida and Lille's in particular vying for some of the biggest and potentially best fights in the entirety of Bleach. In fact, I like these fights so much that I've actually done a Bleach battle analysis on all of them, except I need to do one on the Yoruichi portion of the Askin fight. I might just do a new version of that video and cover the entire fight in one go. We'll see about that. But it's a shame that none of these characters receive any backstory at all, considering they are major antagonists for a sizable portion of the final arc, and I'm hoping this is something the anime will rectify, particularly where the body parts of the Soul King are concerned, because we really need that information. But there is, of course, technically one last member of the Schutzstaffel left unaccounted for: Uryu Ishida, who has been busy enacting his ultimate plan. Given the opportunity to move about Wahrwelt freely now thanks to his promotion, Uryu spreads mysterious chips all over the Quincy Palace before being caught red-handed by Hashwolf, who has already foreseen everything Uryu is going to do. As such, he puts an end to Uryu's scheme before it can even begin. Hashwolf reveals that the chips that Uryu has left all over the place work in a similar fashion to Soken Ishida's Leiden Hand or Sanrei glove, designed to break down and defuse Reishi, exposing Uryu's plot to completely destroy, to devastate, and literally pull apart Wahrwelt in one massive blast. I think it's pretty safe to say that Uryu is no longer considered a member of the Schutzstaffel by the time Hashwolf openly confronts him about his treachery, and the two of them begin battling at the end of the series. So that's it for everything the Schutzstaffel do in the source material. As you can see, they do a fairly good job as our heroes' final obstacles, the ultimate, most steadfast defenders of God's new realm. The Schutzstaffel have been criticised in the past for their absurd powers and abilities, but as I've mentioned before, I've never really taken an issue with it. It's always felt very deliberate on Kubo's part. Yes, the Shinigami are effectively battling literal gods at this point, but not only are we at the end of the series where the stakes have never been higher, but thematically it works perfectly. Yhwach really is the closest thing we've really seen to an actual god in Bleach outside of the Soul King, who is barely a character, and after Yhwach claims his seat atop the New World, he basically is an allegory for God himself. So for his most powerful, most zealous warriors to be his holiest of angels is such an awesome idea in my opinion. The issue doesn't really lie with the abilities of characters like Lille and Gerard, but more with how they are defeated, more with how their fights end up. And I think that small changes, small tweaks, maybe a bit more foreshadowing here and there, would make it that much more palatable. Plus, you've got Askin, who helps ground the group a little bit with some much needed humanity and levity. As I mentioned, if there's one thing I want to see from the Schutzstaffel in the anime, it's a bit more depth. Let's find out a little bit more about them, please. But that's pretty much a wrap on Bleach's strongest villainous group. Apologies for taking a small break from uploading this last week, but I kinda needed it after going in on the 1000-Year Blood War arc anime recently, but regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video. Much like the Bambis before them, I think it's clear that Kubo liked the Schutzstaffel, though I don't think they as a group have the same level of widespread, more mainstream appeal among the fanbase. That being said, they are absolutely dangerous. One thing I didn't really mention is that their closest counterpart in the story is probably the top 3 Espada, a subset within the wider villainous group, and they probably get about the same amount of exposure towards the end of their respective arcs. And of course, they are the main villains of the fake Karakura Town arc, at least until they're not, and act as the final barriers before Aizen, Gin and Tosen enter the fray. But while the top 3 Espada are unquestionably more iconic, more popular, I'd argue they are also unquestionably more useless as well. In the power department, the Schutzstaffel are totally unmatched, and it shows, as we get several great fights out of them as a result, pushing the Shinigami and their allies to the absolute brink. I would maybe even go so far as to make the declaration that I prefer certainly Pernida's fight, probably Lille's fight, and probably Askin's fight to both Harabel and Barragan's fights in the fake Karakura Town arc, though the Stark fight is pretty good, even if I think it doesn't ever reach its full potential. But that's it for the video. I really hope you enjoyed it a lot. Let me know your thoughts on the Schutzstaffel as a unit. Who is your favourite member, and which Schutzstaffel moment is your favourite in Bleach? And which of the Schutzstaffel fights is your favourite? Let me know down in the comments below. Guys, make sure to hit subscribe for more Bleach videos like this every single week. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, and until next time, I'll catch you later, and I'll see you then.